Hello and welcome, and in today's video I'm going to share with you the top 10 most undervalued Ark tames. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. In at number 10 we have got the Megalodon, and this creature is here just simply because, like, I find with ocean creatures people go for basilos and creatures like that, and maybe Moses in the case of some bosses, and I feel like, you know, it's a bit undervalued in that sense because, like, you know, it's the Megalodon. You would think that people will be taming this tons and tons, and they'd just be taming these things all over the place, but actually from experience people don't really tame these things that much, and I think that's a little bit of an undervaluement, if you will, because, you know, these creatures are actually pretty decent and they deal the bleed ability, and yeah, maybe they're not as strong as something like a Moser. I still find they are quite useful for just general underwater travel, and it's partly because I have a bias to Megalodons, because I'm not really a hater of these things. I love these things. I've been taming these things for years and years now, and obviously I'm going to be biased towards the creatures on this list, but I just find it's undervalued, and I feel like people should be taming this creature more, as I don't think it gets what it deserves, really.
So just to pause the video briefly, I do really need to talk about my Patreon, which you can find on Patreon. Of course, it is going to really add to your experience with this channel, at least it is in my opinion, purely because the Patreon has way more content out there for you to experience, and you get all of the big videos, and the channel's going towards bigger videos now a week early. So there's a video already out on the Patreon, which is why Ark is Ark worth it in 2024. I'll put it on screen now, and if you want to see it, then you can only see it on Patreon, or you can become a YouTube member, but I think Patreon is going to be the right choice for you. So if you really feel like you want to join the Patreon, then join. We've already got a couple of members there already, and I hope you're going to be the next.
Next up we have got the Baryonyx, and this creature is here just because the Barry is one of those tames where I find they're so useful for doing caving, and people these days don't really use them that much, and I kind of feel like that's a shame, really. These creatures are just so nicely and heavily used, or at least they were heavily used back in the day, and it seems like there's been a bit of a drop off with these things, and people tend to talk about them less and less. And yes, they're not the newest creatures out there, and maybe there are some other creatures which you might prefer for doing caving. That's perfectly acceptable, but I think people should still be taming these things and using these things. And I'm not saying like no one tames these things and that's a shame. I'm saying like people should tame these things more and experience them more, as loads of people actually just go caving on foot and they don't even bring a creature in, and they end up just dying loads of times. Like in cases like that, a Baryonyx can be really useful, especially considering on ASA at the moment you haven't got Shadow Mains and things like that, and you know, they're so useful for that I find they really should be tamed more, and I think that they definitely do deserve more as creatures. It makes sense to tame them, but people these days are being a little bit more skimpish with them. Now I also did want to put the Moser here as well. I did talk about earlier how, like, yeah, Mosers are stronger than Megalodons. They definitely are, but I find that these creatures are in some ways even more undervalued, and they definitely do need a lot more work than the Megalodon to become some really great creatures. Obviously you got the X-Mosers and X-Megs on Gen 1, but still, the Moser these days actually isn't as used as much as you might think. It's not really used at all. Maybe you might use it for the Moder boss fights, but I find Spinos are commonly used in the case instead of Mosers for that, although people have obviously used Mosers for it. But now with loads of new sea creatures out with like mods and all of that, the Moser just seems very basic and in a lot of ways not really worth taming, and I think that's a bit of a shame. They definitely could do some TLC, especially for the Moser over the Megalodon, and yeah, like, the people just don't tame them as much as they used to, and you know, they're supposed to kind of be the kings of the ocean, so in that sense it is quite a shame. In at number 7 we've got the Carb Enemies, and this creature is here just simply because, like, you know, it's so commonly just basically used as bait, essentially, in a way. Not exactly bait, but people will just use these things to get loads of keratin out of them. And I find that actually as a tame creature they're pretty decent. And yes, maybe they're not the fastest in the world. This does have some increased speed, if you're wondering, by the way, because they are a lot slower than this usually. They're actually pretty decent at swimming in the water, and they're not the slowest things in the world, and give you a good introduction to that. You also, just as a general creature, they're just nice to have. It's useful to have a carb enemies, and yes, maybe they're not essential. I find if maybe they got a little bit of TLC, they really could be some great creatures which people use, like the Trike and the Stego. It could go to that extent if Wildcard gave these things a little bit more thoughts, because they're not really thought of commonly just as a general thing. You just think carb enemies, it's like, oh, the source of keratin, and that's kind of all you think of them. But if you think of them as a tame and actually try and get some use out of them, you'll find that these creatures are actually pretty decent as just a general underwater creature in the early stages of the game, and I definitely do use them for that quite a bit. And although yes, again, the speed is not the best, that is not going to be your main concern, especially in the early stages of the game. You just want those creatures that can actually just enable you to do those things. You're not really in a position where you want the best creatures out there, because you're not far enough in the game yet. Next up, we have got the Quetzal, and this creature is here because I found in the 2015, 2016, wherever the Quetzal was released, I think it was late 2015, but it might have been to 2016. Again, not too sure on that, but either way, in those early stages of Ark, when the Quetzal came out, it was really just used so widely. It was such a cool creature, and although very difficult to tame, with that platform saddle on it, it really did make all the difference. And when the flyer speed leveling and all of that got nerfed, there was just a massive decline in Quetzals, as you know, they're not the fastest out there, and also there were just some other creatures came out that people might like to use more, and that's kind of where the Quetzals had a bit of a downfall. And nowadays the Quetzal isn't tamed all too much, at least not as much as I think it should. And yes, I definitely could say this creature could use some TLC just to buff it up a little bit, but also I kind of just prefer Ark with flyer speed leveling. I also do want to know your opinions. Are you pro flyer speed leveling, or are you against flyer speed leveling? Because I'm definitely very much for it. In at number 5, we've got the Carno, and I put this creature here as just people seem to dismiss the Carno for something like an aloe, and although yes, that is objectively a better creature, I find that the Carno can be just extremely useful as quite an early on carnivore. You don't even need that saddle yet, and if you're on ASA, saddles are very easy to come by in drops, and also you can just kill an adult one, and then if it has a baby one attached to it, it's just such an easy, simple way of taming a Carno. Or you can just tame one the traditional way. It's really not that difficult whatsoever, and once you have one, they are a carnivore that can deal loads of bleed damage and just generally have quite a nice amount of mobility and quite a nice size as well. You can be pretty stealthy on a Carno, and although yes, maybe their footsteps are a bit louder than you might expect, you can be reasonably well hidden with a Carno, which maybe something like an aloe or something larger than that, you would struggle a little bit, because you know, Rexes kind of stick out a lot more than a Carno. Carnos just, they're a little bit more reserved, and I like them for that. They're a good bridge between something like a Raptor and an aloe. It's just, they're such useful creatures, I find, and I use them tons and tons all over the place. And I find people really discount these creatures for creatures like aloes, like I've said before, and I kind of find that's a shame, because I think these really do stand by themselves for being really great creatures. And obviously because of that, I'm going to put them on this list, because I find that they definitely are undervalued creatures, and I wish that people paid them a little bit more respect, as I think it is definitely well deserved. In at number 4, we've got the Yuti, and the Yuti isn't here just because people don't really use it. I find it's undervalued for its versatility, because people just use these things in boss fights for that one case where you buff your creatures, and that's it. People won't use them for other things, and I find that is a huge waste of a creature like this, as they are capable of dealing tons of damage, and you can even just use them to fight bosses with, although that's not my preferred use. They're just really great carnivores that can traverse maps just quite easily compared to something like the Rex, and obviously they're kind of better than aloe in some ways and all of that, and obviously then you can debuff creatures. They just work really well as creatures to travel around the map with, and you can even do meta runs and things like that. And I know that seems a little bit far-fetched for some people, but I find they are just really great creatures for that. And obviously the RG is going to be better for meta runs because it's a flying creature. Still, you could do quite a lot with something like a UT apart from just use it for fighting bosses. And I want to know, what do you use the UT for apart from in bosses? Because I'm not too sure if there's many people out there that use the UT for many other things apart from that, and that's why I think it's undervalued. I don't think it's undervalued as in people don't use this creature or care about this creature, because they do, but it's undervalued for its versatility. In at number 3, we've got the Gasbags, and this creature is here just because I find it can just be a really useful Ark creature in general, and people don't really use it. And yes, there is a bit of a learning curve, and by the time I recorded this B-roll, I really wasn't great at flying this thing, but now I'm quite a significant amount better. I'm not going to say I'm a god at flying this thing, but I can actually get it to kind of move where I like. So I do excuse in advance my quite terrible Gasbag flying, because yeah, I really did not do a great job with this B-roll. I have to re-record it at some point and, you know, get it all looking like I can't, that I can fly the Gasbag instead of I can't. But either way, these creatures insanely useful just as a general tank as well. If you puff them up, there's a lot of damage reduction, and obviously great for doing meta runs and things like that, because they've got tons of weight, and you don't even need a saddle to ride one. But if you do chuck the saddle on, obviously you get extra armor and another player can join you. So it's actually quite useful if you have friends in the Ark world, and you know, you might want to bring one along with you for a meta run. And I know these are all quite basic uses for the Gasbags. I find people don't really use them as much, and I know the Maywing is like that go-to traveling mount, and you can just do a lot with the Maywing. I find maybe give the Gasbags a go if you have access to the Gasbags, because I find they're a little bit undervalued as a creature, and I find people can do a lot with Gasbags. It's just they don't really end up doing anything with them, and I find that's quite a shame really. I wish people did actually use these things a lot more, because they just work so well in so many situations, especially for turret soaking and metal runs, to just name the main two that they use for. So yes, Gasbags, really undervalued creature in my opinion, and I hope that more people use this creature going into the future. In at number 2, we have got the Crystal Wyvern, and this creature is simply here because I find compared to the normal Wyverns, these are extremely undervalued, and people have been saying that the Ember Crystal Wyvern is really a highlight for them. For me, it's the Blood Crystal Wyvern. Obviously, this I'm pretty sure is neither. It's just a Tropical Crystal Wyvern. They really are so useful, and a few people in my community have been saying yes, they definitely do really agree with this, and the general consensus is, oh, the Crystal Wyverns are just not as strong as Wyverns, but actually I find they're even more effective than all Wyverns, and that obviously does come from the fact that the taming method is a lot easier. Yes, it is capped behind level 60, and also you have to knock out one to get the Primal Crystal in the first place, but once you've done that, it's not really that difficult, and even that bit isn't difficult whatsoever. So, you know, these things are ridiculously easy to tame, and they're just such good creatures. They really do have to be on this list because people extremely undervalue them, and I find that they need to be on this list because they need more attention. They really do deserve it. They are great creatures which are strong in all aspects apart from turning circles, but you know, that's not great on the Wyvern anyway, and I just find they're so useful for so many things, even more so than the Wyvern, although they're kind of the same creature, although I do find these are better because they're just easier to tame and there's a lot less of a lengthy process you have to go through to get them. I really do find they're extremely effective, and I wish people use these creatures more. And in at number 1, we've got the Bloodstalker, and this creature is here because I find, yes, people do use it for traveling and all of that. It gets a bit undervalued over the Maywing, and I find it can be really effective. Also, I do excuse my Bloodstalker flying. Really was not the best at flying it back when I recorded this B-roll, but I assure you I'm better now. And obviously I'm going to have to re-record those Gasbags and Bloodstalker B-rolls. I will add it onto my list of stuff to do, but also I find that these are the best ocean creature out there. I know they're not ocean creatures, but they're the best kind of dealing with the underwater environment in my opinion, and I didn't show any of that in this B-roll, which is another reason why I really do need to re-record it. Either way, these creatures are are just so great at traversing underwater environments. They're so quick and speedy, and they can deal quite hefty amounts of damage as well, which you might not expect. And maybe you're not going to take it to do alpha creatures, but you can just easily zip away from them. Also, on top of that, they can glide on the top of the water as well, so kind of just to escape danger even more, you can just simply skim across the top of the water and get out of the way of all of those creatures that are trying to attack you. And also on top of that, you kind of do have like an awesome spyglass, but without the need for an awesome spyglass, so you can see the aggros of all the creatures. Extremely useful, especially in an underwater environment when the visibility isn't quite as great as obviously just on land. So I do find they're extremely useful for everything like that as well. And obviously if you're on Gen 1, you can warrant loads and loads of use out of these things. They're kind of like rock drakes in that sense. They are like a creature which you essentially really have to use for that purpose. So yes, in my opinion, the Bloodstalker is the most undervalued creature for what I think it could do. I just find people don't use it for that, and that's why I put it in at number 1. The top 10 most underrated Ark Dinos. In at number 10 is the Tusoteuthis, and I think, in my opinion, this creature is severely underrated for so many things, as this actually is a pretty decent combat creature, and albeit its tame is very weird, requiring a lot of beer, which is something no other tame uses, and it can be a bit of a pain to get. It is actually a really good combat creature when you actually have one to use, and it is great. And especially on smaller creatures, it has insane knockback, and it can even throw boulders as well, and that is a simply great ability which can't be missed. So you really should give the Tusoteuthis a try at some point, and you will definitely not regret the tame. Next up, we have the Bloodstalker, and you may say that this is a controversial one as it is used a lot in some cases, but I would actually say that this creature isn't used enough, and everyone should be using a Bloodstalker if they can obviously get their hands on one. These things are just so useful, and they're so quick, and they're really great in the water as well. And I don't see too many people using these things for water cave runs on the island, which I have been doing in recent times. Obviously, it makes sense that you wouldn't be doing that in ASA, as the Bloodstalker isn't in ASA at the moment, but in ASC there really isn't any excuse, because I think these things do spawn on Fjorda. If not, then I'll take that back, but I'm pretty sure that they do spawn on Fjorda, which means that there is a free DLC out there with Bloodstalkers. Either way, you can use a spawn command as well, and then tame one from wild if you want to do that to get access to that creature. And I really think you should really try and get your hands on one of these things, as they are some of the most useful creatures out there. They can travel around the map really fast, like I've said. They deal a lot of damage, and on Gen 1 and on Gen 2, they're pretty useful for loads of missions as well, and they are really splendid water creatures. So what isn't to love about the Bloodstalker? Maybe apart from its taming method. Now, the Carno has to be respected when it comes to Ark, at least in my opinion, because this is one of the most useful creatures out there to me, especially in the earlier stages of the game. This creature just has so much to like about it, from its bleed ability to its speed and its ridiculously easy tame, especially on ASA. If you're an Allo lover though, then you can always go for the Allo over the Carno, but there is a certain charm in the Carno which I don't get from the Allo, and I'll usually not even tame Carnos and go for an Allo. But the Allo is obviously the significantly more popular tame, and I would kind of lean that more towards the overrated side of Ark creatures. But I would say it's not particularly overrated or underrated, and it kind of is where it should be. Whereas the Carno is really just not respected enough in my opinion, and I wish people used it more. Especially considering when Squid used it back in the day, that was like basically the best creature to him. Obviously, Rexus was sort of kind of more respected, but that was also like 2016 Ark. And back then, Rexes were just like the most highly respected creatures, where now Rexes really aren't that much of a big deal anymore. Now, the Gacha has not really been talked about ever since Extinction came out. Obviously, this is still a very useful creature, which a lot of people out there I'm sure do use, but I do think it deserves a lot more press. But I guess it kind of does get a little bit of press, considering Gacha Claws comes around every Christmas. But still, the actual Gacha really isn't used as much. Although it is somewhat of an icon, people really don't use it all that much, and its abilities are really ones to be respected. Now, the Element Dust thing is a little bit out of date, considering that element is so easy to get on Gen 2, but all of those weapons which you can get from this thing is not accessible from any other source, really. Obviously, drops are a thing, and this is going to become even less useful when Extinction's out on ASA, because drops are OP, but I really think this creature should be respected and used more to this day. Now, next up we have the Megalosaurus, and this creature really is one of those creatures which I have to put on this list. And albeit when Arboration came out, this thing was used so much, and if you are playing Arboration, you're probably going to use this thing. But nowadays this thing kind of seems somewhat forgotten about, and it is literally one of the best carnivores in the game, especially considering its size, and it is so iconic, and it has a wealth of abilities to go on top of that as well. And albeit the mechanic of it only really working at night time isn't one which is the best compared to some other carnivores, but it is really great on Arboration, considering that it counts as always being night, which is obviously why these things are very useful. Also there you can see one of the abilities that this creature has, which is when it can grapple creatures into its mouth. Obviously it can't really do that with really large creatures. It'd be very weird if it could do that with something like a Rex, but smaller creatures it can do that, and that is a very efficient way to get rid of Microraptors, and what absolute nuisances those creatures are. So it's really great that you can get rid of those things with this thing. And also on top of that, in terms of its size, it is a really good size for transport, making it a pretty good travel dino as well. And as my go-to on Arboration, if I'm getting a Rock Drake for the first time, I'll just bring one of these things down, obviously a good level, so it can withstand all the things down there, and then I will get my first Rock Drake egg, and then from there I will use a Rock Drake to get down there. But still, the Megalosaurus is a very good travel mount and a very good carnivore overall, and I think the general public should use it more. In at number 5 is the Spino, and this creature, in my opinion, really isn't respected as enough as it should be. In terms of its popularity, yes, it isn't going to be the most underrated creature out there, but that is why it is in number 5. But in terms of its use compared to its popularity, it is very outweighed compared to something like the Rex, which albeit doesn't get as much press as it used to back in the early days of Ark, and that is because the Rex just simply isn't the strongest dinosaur in the game now. And I think at a point when the game released it was, and then the Alpha Rex came around, and then Gigas came around, and then yeah, the Rex really wasn't respected as much. But the Spino back in the early days was respected a lot actually, as this was just considered the stronger carnivore by so many people out there, and loads of you probably used this thing back in the day, and I used it then. And obviously it still does have enough popularity to warrant a TLC, as Wildcard did give it one of those, so now it can stand on its hind legs, it has the hydration buff, and it's just overall a better creature. But in terms of it compared to the Rex, I actually vastly prefer it, because of its increased mobility, the fact that it is great in the water as well, and the fact that it deals a little bit more damage than the Rex, although its health is significantly lower, which is where its main drawback is. But if you do some good breeding on these things, and you get loads and loads of health mutations, you can have yourself a Rex equivalently health Spino, and then you'll have yourself a really great boss creature. And it's actually a shame that these creatures aren't used as much as they should be, in my opinion, especially considering they got that TLC. Next up, we have the Mantis, and this creature is really, again, not used as much as it should be, and it has a really cool ability. And I know quite a lot of you PvE players out there do use the Mantis, but to PvP players and also just the general Ark community, I would advise you tame a Mantis at some point. They are just so good, and there really isn't an excuse to not tame one unless you're on mobile, obviously, as these things spawn on Ragnarok. And they are ridiculously easy to tame once you've already done the prep. You've got the ghillie, you've got the bug repellent, and you've got the woolly rhino horns. It's just a very simple passive tame, and you have yourself pretty much one of the best harvesters in the Ark game. and I especially use it for harvesting mutton with swords, obviously, as it is just a really great way of doing it. But it is also great at gathering metal with picks, obviously. You can gather great stone with hatchets. You can use pikes as well, which I will use for the manticore on Scorched Earth. If I'm ever doing it, I won't use swords, I'll use pikes as the durability is better, and they can pretty much wield any melee weapon which you choose them to, making them an absolute harvesting god. They can't wield tech weapons though, that would be a little bit too OP. In at number 3 is the Crystal Wyvern, and this creature in my opinion is one of those which is severely underrated, as it is pretty much the easiest tame in the Ark game. The only real downside it has is obviously that level 65 requirement, which is a bit of a shame really, but apart from that, this is a literal perfect creature to me. It is the same as a Wyvern in reality, and it has a much easier taming method, just requiring some crystal. You don't need anything else. You can just go on a note run and then get the necessary crystal, and in your first even hour of playing, you can probably have one of these Wyverns at your disposal. On single player, obviously. On official, I think that is a bit too optimistic. But even on official, these things can be obtained pretty quickly with a good note run. And also, if you get the Blood Crystal Wyverns as well, you have yourself an even better version of the Crystal Wyvern. That creature is definitely by far the best version of the Crystal Wyvern, and considering their mobility and power, which is I'm pretty sure the same as an exact Wyvern, at least it feels like it to me when using one, you really can't go wrong with these things, especially considering they don't need a saddle. And earlier than the Pteranodon, as long as you do a note run, you can get these things really quickly into your roster of creatures. So what isn't to love about this thing? In at number 2 is the Beelzebufo, and this creature is the absolute king when it comes to cementing paste gathering, obviously doing that through killing any kind of insect, and especially considering ASA only has the island at the moment, and insect levels aren't a thing on ASA, this is the best time if you have ASA obviously to get a Beelzebufo, and it still is a great idea on any other Ark map where these things spawn and there are insects, which I think is every Ark map that has the Beelzebufo. Not sure if the Beels is on every map though, as I don't think it would be fitting on maps like Scorched Earth, but you never really know, as I think the Megatheriums are on Scorched Earth or something. There's no, it's the Direwolves, isn't it? Yeah, Direwolves are on Scorched Earth, which is a little bit weird, so you don't really know what to expect, but I'm pretty sure this thing isn't on Scorched, and I don't think it's on Arboration either. But either way, on the island, which is the map which kind of matters the most, as most people have it, it is obviously there, and you have the insect cave in the redwoods, so this is pretty much the most sustainable way of getting cementing paste. Yes, a beaver dam may be easier, but this is going to give you even more cementing paste, and you can always rely that you'll get the same amount every time, and there won't be the risk of beaver dams not spawning. And in at number 1 is the Velonosaur, and I really think this creature should be respected a lot more when it comes to Ark, especially considering I am playing through Extinction again at the moment, and I have just fell in love with this creature. There is just so much good about it. It is so cool, and its abilities are actually very useful. For starters, it is actually a very good travel mount, having a lot of speed and barely any stamina drain, which is perfect for a travel mount. Also, its saddle really isn't very expensive as well, and its taming method is very easy. You just build a simple 2x2 trap and then net gun it if you want to. Instead of building a trap, you don't need to net gun it in the trap, that's unnecessary. You can either put it in a basic trap or net gun it, and then simply trank it out, and then you have yourself a great Velonosaur. Sadly, the turrets which they fire, or the bullets, not the turrets, they do not scale when you level up the melee damage, but you can always level up your stamina to shoot even more of these things. And I think when you look at it head on, that animation kind of looks a little bit creepy. Obviously, you don't just have the turret firing ability, although that is the most useful to me. You also just do have your general melee abilities, and it can also shake the spines off of its back too, which you're seeing here.
So thank you to my wonderful patrons Ekaterina Puchkova, Karina Thorne, Dominic Masajewski, and Ethan Tapia, who have all supported me through Patreon or through YouTube memberships. If you want to join this list, then go join Patreon or YouTube members, but thanks to all of these guys. So thank you to my wonderful patrons Ekaterina Puchkova, Karina Thorne, Dominic Masajewski, and Ethan Tapia, who have all supported me through Patreon or through YouTube memberships. If you want to join this list, then go join Patreon or YouTube members. But thanks to all of these guys.